podcast, Olga Mizrahi, best-selling author of The Gig Is Up, talks about the gig and the future of work. So stay tuned.
Make somebody feel.
That is cool. Love to. So let's talk about it in the podcast as well. Love to have a conversation.
Wherever you want to go. It's fine.
Yes, let's go there. And then once we are done with this, then we can chat. Sure. Okay. So let me know when we can start.
Recording that?
Sorry.
Are you recording that?
I've started the recorder now. So
Okay,
you tell me
great.
when you're good to go, and we'll start. Should I start?
Go for it.
Awesome. So welcome everyone to Jobs of Future podcast. Today we have with us Olga Mizrahi. A brief bio. Olga is the best-selling author of The Gig Is Up, recently featured in Forbes, CNBC, Fast Company. She instructs in the digital marketing program for the University of California. Mrs. Mizrahi is an international speaker, marketing expert on branding in the gig economy, Airbnb, ASAE, KNX Small Business Summit, and blogs at Chunks of Change. With that, Olga, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, first of all, for having me.
I think what I found fascinating about your profile, and I was discussing with you before the podcast as well, that when we started this conversation around jobs of future, I want some serious representation from the gig side of the world. And I think when I saw your book, I said, wow, I need to reach out to you. And thank you so much for picking up and agreeing to speak. So before we start, why don't we talk about your journey? Like, what brought you to this? What do you do? What are you most excited about nowadays?
Okay, so first of all, I blog at chunkofchange.com. Kind of see it behind me. That way. So anybody is welcome to connect with me there and learn more, of course. So you asked me kind of about my journey and what brought me to writing about the gig economy, and kind of by accident, right? We trip into certain things. But it just turns out that I've been working within the gig economy, both as a project manager and bringer together of resources for multiple projects. And then on the other side, where maybe I'm working on a gig for a much larger institution and doing this for really close to 15 years now. Had worked in corporate before with e-commerce brands, large brands, and then struck out on my own with a creative agency called ASAE Design here in Long Beach, California. Well, 15 years ago, when you had a virtual agency, you didn't broadcast it because there was a stigma, like you weren't serious, right? How could you work seriously in a corporation if you didn't have a room with cubicles in it? And how could you work seriously if your designer and your coder were much more comfortable in their own environment at home than you having your thumb on them, right? So we would do silly things like go into these large meetings with business cards that had phone numbers that were off by only one digit, but they were all disposable cell phones, right? So drug dealer special. Like, why? Because that made the client more comfortable. Like, oh, Olga, you're looking over all these people. We know that you're going to do a good job on our project. So we were getting these gigs, and it was something where you could say it's kind of a transient team, right? Sometimes it's larger, sometimes it's smaller. You're just bringing in the resources that are needed. And so I realized that I had been doing this kind of unbeknownst to me that it was called something, right? The gig economy. And then I started seeing how technology was just a game changer. And we all know this, right? We know what it is to, order a Lyft or an Uber, which, by the way, total side note, did you know that Uber was created because the founder of Uber saw Casino Royale, and James Bond in the movie is tracking another car on his Sony Ericsson state-of-the-art phone and showing like the little beep, 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 like going across. And in my mind, I think to myself, like, that movie's not that old, right? It was 2006, right? So like the first iPhone has barely come out, because 2017 was the 10th anniversary of the iPhone, right? So and here you have, like, they're like, hey, how come, I just have this iPhone, I think I could start to do that on my iPhone. And so it starts to roll forward. So if you think about the not only the gig economy, but how smartphones in essence have changed all of our lives in terms of work life and communication, for good and bad. Okay. It kind of feels like the parable of the frog, right? This idea, like, and okay, first, for the parable of the frog to work, you have to think of a frog as like a delicious treat, like maybe Chick-fil-A. But the old saying goes, right? If you want to boil a frog, you throw it into a pot of boiling water, it just jumps right out. But if you throw it into some cold water and then slowly turn up the heat, voila, gourmet frog, pretty soon. And that's kind of how I think about the gig economy. It's really weird. Like, it's all around us. It has completely changed our lives. And yet we're kind of not aware of it. So anyway, my background in doing all this led me to start to understand how clients chose us, not only as a company, but sometimes me individually as a consultant, and how teams were formed and how they were disbanded and how it was becoming more global, where our teams were, not really bound by sometimes even time zone, right? Let alone country. And looking at this as the future pace and how it started just incredibly accelerating, especially after 2012. And 2012 is really that turning year. And I'm sure you can kind of guess why. Any guess why 2012 was the year?
Why?
Over 50% smartphone penetration in. So all of a sudden it's like rocket fuel. Now all of a sudden it's like, not only are we using apps kind of naturally, but it's also starting to absolutely change the way we communicate at work. Been on a Slack channel recently, those kind of things. And so when you look at that as a whole, you start to see more and more people, sometimes involuntarily, but most of the time voluntarily, going into more gig work. And when you look at the newest generation in the workforce, millennials, they want, like, 85% of millennials want to work remotely 100% of the time. So, that right there tells you that there's a huge shift too coming, and Gen Z will soon outpace millennials here within like the next 2 years. So we have a lot, obviously, going on and a lot to unpack. And I did a lot of research for this book, and I honestly thought, it took me a little while to write, and I had thought about this concept about 3 years ago, and I thought that I was late to the game. I thought to myself, oh, by the time I publish this, everybody's going to know everything anyway. Right? And here we are. And so there are some real basic fundamental things in the book that will help anybody kind of attack the future of work and do it. We can
Interesting.
and during this podcast.
So what, running a marketing agency or digital marketing agency and then writing a book about gig, like what brought you to this revelation that, hey, I want to talk about it? We'll resume after a short break. This part of the podcast is brought to you by First Friday Fair, fastest AI powered way to find your next opportunity. Check out the website firstfridayfair.tao.ai and find your next dream job. Let's get back to the podcast.
Because a lot of people talk about it only through the lens of like Uber and Airbnb, and it's so much more than that. In fact, it hasn't really been defined very well. And my definition for it, very broad. It's really, to me, gig work is about project-based or on-demand services that can be provided by anyone at any time. And so when you look at it just from the scope of the United States, you might be looking at it almost like as a tax classification, right? Are you W-2 or are you 1099? Because you're a contractor. Certain technologies, right? You might be actually at 1099 for, Upwork as opposed to XYZ company. And there might be some other things that kind of get rolled in with that, certain benefits based on the platform. Like for instance, care.com as a platform, obviously they have an app too, but we're talking about platforms as well in this. They help their users with all the tax mumbo jumbo, right? And so they're giving you a value add by saying, hey, if you are on our platform and use our platform, you're not going to get in trouble for having an undocumented nanny, because we're going to make sure that like everything's legit and you can just access the stuff there, right? And most of the platforms, the benefit to the user is payment, immediate payment, right? Like that is enough of a value proposition to get somebody in the door. I heard a commercial recently for Lyft here in Los Angeles area, and they were basically promising immediate payment after the ride was over and a minimum.
Wow.
That if you took a certain amount of rides for, I don't know how long it was, a month, that you would be guaranteed a minimum of, can't exactly remember, but $1,800 or something like that for that month, regardless of kind of how you did. So they're starting to, it's really interesting because they're competing obviously for the giggers to get on their platforms. But that doesn't mean that you have to use an app part of the gig economy, because honestly, the last time I looked, I think it was only 4% of the workforce are taking advantage of the apps. And
Interesting.
it can be in completely different, varied ways. I'm an author. I speak internationally. I have a creative agency that I run during the day. And yet I also am an Airbnb superhost and an Airbnb experience host, and have other multiple gigs on the side too. So
interesting. And so what is the premise behind, what is the mindset behind this book, The Gig is Up?
Okay, so it's called Let's Tear Down the Confusion Behind It and give people a feeling of success going into this. Because in my mind, and most of the people that I talk to, and maybe some of the thinkers that you talk to, we see it as inevitable that this is going to change work as we know it regardless. And you can look at it in conjunction with technology, and you can look at it in conjunction with artificial intelligence, AI, right? And robotics. You can look at it in conjunction with all of that. But you look at all those things, and like AI alone, there's some statistics out there that say 90% of jobs won't be here in 10 years, right? So, I mean, that's kind of scary, isn't it? Like, aren't you scared shitless? Most people are, because they go, wow, how am I going to make a living? With my robot overlord, and, you kind of go, okay, well, then let's try to understand and unpack how people choose. So that's what I kind of want to give people. I want to give people the confidence to go out there and say, this is why you should choose me again and again and again. And by building up that confidence and understanding kind of how this all works, I think that they can be successful.
Interesting.
Regardless of what the future throws their way.
So what is, from your vantage point, how serious is the gig economy? I think you said that right now 4% of workforce currently uses something around the gigs. So your research,
but the gig economy is bigger. So the gig economy right now, 1 out of every 3 people identify with being part of the gig economy. That means that they are doing some sort of project, some sort of temporary work that might be a side gig, might be moonlighting from their current job, and it might even be a sort of startup where they might be using a platform to help start up something that's going to grow beyond that, right? So that number is growing to be 1 out of every 2 people just in the next couple years by 2010. And if you look at some of the studies done by Upwork and the Freelancers Union, they claim that the majority of the workforce will be freelance. So 60% plus will be freelance within the next 10 years. That's huge.
Interesting. Because I think, and we were talking about before the conversation, as before our podcast as well, that when why I really wanted someone to come from the gig end was when I talked to a traditional hierarchy in an enterprise world, and I asked them about, hey, how serious is gig economy? I am getting this dissing signals from more conversations than I anticipated. So I think, and I get a lot of pushbacks around, hey, you know what? How can you build your platform around gig workers or something like so? Enterprise still believes some stability in the workforce and all that. So what's your take on that?
Okay, so I want to make sure I understand your question, right? Because we're talking about a technology company and you're talking about a product that they're making and they're looking at gig workers as their target. That's a very diverse audience, right? It can be an Airbnb host and it can be a temporary CEO. There's a huge range of the type of gig work that's out there. And the consultants that are traditionally consultants even kind of fall under this scenario. I think the challenge to traditional HR and traditional organizations is this. Tell me right now in your teams if you have a increase in contract workers. And the answer is going to be yes. Because we see that. We see that in the statistics, and we see that from the feedback of the enterprises. And we know that they're taking out more of the full-time positions for a variety of reasons as well, right? So then that changes teams. It changes team dynamics. If you have, a remote worker, you have a contract worker that's coming into the office, or you have somebody that might even be local, but like me is working from their home most of the time. I might come into a client every so often, but the majority of the time I'm right here in beautiful Long Beach, California. Right? So that changes the dynamic of teams. It changes the dynamic of how you hire, how you find talent, and how you retain top talent. Because all of a sudden, there's different priorities, like flexibility, like working remotely, that are on people's radar. You have millennials in the workforce changing jobs on average every 2.5 years. So you're telling me that gig work doesn't factor into that at all? Like they're treating their job like a gig. You're just going to retrain every 2 years? Chances are not. You're going to start seeing certain specialists for who they are and wanting to get those top people to work on your project.
Interesting.
You end up having a mixed dynamic.
I think that's pretty cool. And thank you for addressing that. So now, from your vantage point, if I'm an enterprise and I'm sort of a company that wants to ensure that I exist tomorrow, how do I factor in this gig workforce? Like, what are some of the things that you would suggest to someone from the enterprise end that will help them to prepare for it?
So this is a tough one because what happens is we start to look at companies and say, like, well, what are they? If companies can be boiled down to a bunch of transient workers, because most people will say at a company, they'll say, we are our people. Like, our people are everything to us, right? And then beyond that, there's also maybe processes, maybe some proprietary ways that they do things that they've discovered. But a lot of that is kind of eroding away because, again, transient workforce. All of a sudden, your proprietary stuff, I mean, ask Samsung and Apple, right? Like, all of a sudden, your proprietary stuff is over here, or ask people that are competing against China, how that's working out. And so you start to realize that there are certain things that create a competitive advantage that didn't in the past. This is the very first year, Vishal, that Fortune magazine's best companies to work for had a new metric that factored into how they looked at what the best companies to work for are. And that new metric was the best place to work for all.
Interesting.
So they're looking at based on not based on hierarchy. So, if you're in the mailroom or if you're the CEO, kind of like, is this the best place to work and why? And that's also based on, male, female, race, gay, straight, transgender, like this idea of, is this the best place to work for all? Is it the most inviting for all types of people? And that includes contract workers and remote teams and all that stuff. And what they found was that this isn't just a diversity and inclusion dynamic. This isn't just a feel good, oh, we have diversity in our company, awesome. That the companies that embraced this had something like 5 times the growth compared to companies in their respective industries that didn't, based on this stuff. So all of a sudden, it's also good for business, right? It's not just a feel good type of thing, which is, I think, if you look at kind of what the ratings were for this last year, I believe Salesforce came out on top. So, you start to see, like, that's not a company that was mentioned as a top company to work for anytime in the recent past. And now it's leapfrogging over ones that are much more traditional and well-known. And you have to kind of ask why.
Interesting. We'll resume after a short break. This part of the podcast is brought to you by First Friday Fair, fastest AI-powered way to find your next opportunity. Check out the website firstfridayfair.tao.ai and find your next dream job. Let's get back to the podcast. Interesting. I think one stat that I was thinking about is, I think you talked about 2.5 years before a typical worker churn out nowadays. So I think I was having a conversation with one of the senior executive in HR space, and they were talking about empowering workers, right? And I think there was a discussion around, hey, we educate and empower workers when they are sort of working with us, but when sort of we talk about increasing churn rate, or at least the cycle is shrinking for people to churn, it would leave a lot of onus on workers to train themselves rather than relying on company to be cutting edge.
That's what we find in the gig economy, is that freelancers keep up with their skill set at a much higher rate than traditional workers. They look at it as just part of who they are. The lifelong learning is something that needs to be embraced for the future. So
interesting.
And as a company, you can, like, when we talk about attracting the best talent, I'm going to teach you a skill that's going to add to your awesomeness by working on this project. And hopefully we even have something after that for you that will be, slightly different or whatever. And you get to make a difference, right? Like, that's going to attract the future worker more than money. Because I may value flexibility over money. And that's another thing that we're seeing. Wall Street Journal came out with an article just yesterday about how people are less willing to relocate for work because of a lot of complex reasons, right? Because of family dynamics, because of divorces, because of this, because of that. But they cite an example of a woman, and I found this really interesting, that was offered a VP position, but she had to move away from Florida, and she wasn't willing to do that. And this is someone who makes, $300,000 a year, and was offered, like, the next logical step in the career track for, what that might be. And instead is kind of staying put and maybe adding some of this, like we talk about, side work, gig work, in order to still expand her horizons, but not in the traditional way that you would think. And so, if it was only about money, then I'd see more people relocating for work. because companies are offering more money right now because they know that the job market is tight.
Right.
It has to be something else. So we know flexibility is one factor. We know that feeling like you're making a difference and being heard is another factor. So, if I'm talking to an HR person and they're talking to me like, what are some of the things that we can do to compete in this future of work? I'd say, not what are you doing to empower your people, but what are you doing to make your people feel like they're seen?
Interesting. And what are some of the suggestions you have for workers as they're going to this gigified workforce, how they can make themselves lucrative for future offering? Like what are some of your thoughts there?
Okay, so this is the part where it gets a little scary because we have to take a look at how we all choose, and we have to kind of get judgy. We don't like it when other people judge us, right? And we don't like it when we're just a series of stars. You want to ask about small business and how much they love Yelp? No, they hate Yelp, right? Why do they hate Yelp? Same reason why we would hate being rated. But guess what? You're already getting rated, whether it's through recommendations on LinkedIn or by your Uber driver, because guess what? They give you a star rating too, right? And so what if we boiled it all down to one question, which is kind of scary, and that is, why choose you? Why choose you, Michelle? Why choose you? Why did I choose to talk to you today? Why choose you? So there's something there that works for me because there's a particular fit. Like it elicits, like it struck a chord with me, right? Like even the name of your podcast struck a chord with me. Like it's a fit for who I am and what I like to talk about, right? If you were like 15-minute meals, I wouldn't be your girl. Right? We're talking about the future of work. So this is where it gets scary for people because it says you are now competing with a larger fishbowl. You are now one of many, and it's not going to feel good when you're just in this sea of what looks like endless choice for the person that's doing the hiring. But my question to you is, how can you get into a smaller fishbowl? How can you become the big fish in that smaller fishbowl where you're the brightest, the most colorful, the fastest? And if you notice, I'm using a lot of S's. And this is one thing that I've learned from being a marketer for so long, and companies make this too all the time. People speak about themselves in ERS. Better, faster, cheaper. And if there's one surefire way to put someone to sleep, that would be it. Because as humans, we are hardwired to spot the difference, right? We are, our primitive brains are on the savannah, and we're just looking across that landscape, and we see something move out of the corner, and we're like, what is that? And our survival instinct goes, crap, that's a lion. I need to get out of here. And so you need to be the lion today so that I notice you. Because we are in an attention economy, right? So you have to get that person's attention first. And ERS won't do it. So what are you best at? What are those qualities about you that are unique? And sometimes the way that story is told is in different ways, graphically, by other people sometimes, right? What do you think recommendations are? Stories about you with other people. Because if I'm hiring or I'm choosing, I want to make sure I'm making the right choice. So I'm looking for those signals that tell me that this person's going to perform well because they did it here. Oh, look, there's a brand that I recognize. Ding, ding, ding. That's familiar to me. That makes me feel safer. Okay, cool. So just by like having logos, like if you had a personal website, right? Having logos that you've worked with and ideally testimonials from those people that are backed up by actual LinkedIn recommendations, because there's a a social proof element there, right? So like, I don't have to tell you that I went into Dole. Someone else talked about it for me. I don't have to tell you that I spoke at so-and-so's national convention and I did really well, because that wouldn't sound right coming from me, because that's marketing. Someone else says the story and it's social proof, and then that makes you feel good. It's the same as a Yelp review for a restaurant. You know what's funny?
Hmm.
I'm going to ask you if you do this. Do you use Yelp when you
Yes.
go to a new place? Okay. Do you ever do this? Are you ever skeptical of 5-star reviews?
We'll resume after a short break. This part of the podcast is brought to you by First Friday Fair, fastest AI-powered way to find your next opportunity. Check out the website firstfridayfair.tao.ai and find your next dream job. Let's get back to the podcast. Yeah.
Like, are you more comfortable with like a 4.5-star review?
Yes.
Why?
Because I think critical, right? So I want someone with something.
You want it to be authentic.
Yeah.
Is what I would argue. And sometimes what we do, and I'm guilty of this too, is if I'm in a new place and I'm looking something up, I'm going to look at the negative review, and then I'm making a judgment on the person making the negative review, right? I'm like, okay, this place has 4 stars, but what are the negative people saying? And then you have like, hello, picky eater, that like didn't get a free whatever. So then you were mad, and then your friend loved their meal, but yours was, not artfully presented, but it was delicious. What? And then I'm like, okay, whatever, picky eater. I'm going to go there. I'm going to support this local business. These people, who do they think they are? Right? And we do that. We now make a judgment call on the actual reviews, because we're kind of looking for that authenticness. And we're also looking for the people that are like, dude, that person can't be pleased no matter what you do. And that's really important, because we can't please all the people all the time. We just can't. And so we have to pick from our best qualities so that it's a menu for them. Like, aren't you skeptical of a restaurant that you go to and it has like 600-page menu? Hello, Cheesecake Factory. Like, you go for the cheesecake. You're not going for the whatever, pasta carbonara. Like, no, you're going for the cheesecake. Their unique value proposition is pretty clear why you would choose to eat there, not because of their 600-page menu. And so when you give someone too many things about you and not any of them really kind of bubbling to the top about who you are, what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for the ignore button. You're setting yourself up for the Google back button, the dreaded Google back button. Oh, no, they're not a fit back. Because everybody's going to make that judgment call like super fast. I mean, you've got like split second to say, like if somebody watches your podcast and says, hey, I like how Olga speaks. Like, I want her to speak to my organization. I've done my job. Right. There's something about the way that this conversation's going that's going to interest them. And maybe I said something interesting, but beyond that, like, not everybody's on podcasts, so how are you normally chosen? Well, for right now anyway, your LinkedIn profile is important, but there are other apps and other tools that are coming to compete with LinkedIn. So like, if I'm on LinkedIn, maybe I have to get out of my comfort zone a little and start putting out videos on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is saying videos are important to us right now. So if you do a video, and especially a live video, we're going to put that towards the top of everybody's feed. So if I'm getting to be known for something, maybe that's what I'm going to do. Maybe that would be part of my strategy.
Interesting.
Now that I've horrified everybody with video, because most people don't want to be on video, we have to take a look at it though. That's how the majority of people choose. They'd rather see a short video, like a sizzle reel almost, of who you are and what you do. And again, that you are good at what they're trying to fill, and so everybody has unique qualities, and those unique qualities are enough to let you bubble to the top. But it's up to you to stake to put the stake in the ground and shout it from the mountaintops. And that's super, super scary for people. So let's talk about a little bit how to do that. You think that would be helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. So a value proposition is an inherent promise of benefit by a company, a person too. That is, what is that benefit going to be to the end user, right? The consumer, but also to the employer, to the partner. Okay. What is it that you're providing that benefit? Okay. And people look at that via just a quick little calculation that they do that in their head, benefit minus cost, right? That's the value proposition. You say, I provide this benefit, and if I'm a fit for you, awesome, choose me. That's great, but it's not enough. Unique value proposition, or UVP, is when we bring in that unique component and we say, what are these qualities that make you the best choice right now? A lot of times we discount the timing. And yet if you've worked on any team, in any scenario, you know that it's like, I need like Mr. Right now. So all of a sudden my pool shrinks, or I need somebody that's close who can come in, or I need someone who's available who just ended a project. I need another one. So you have those opportunities. Can you move quick enough and anticipate that next project's needs enough? How would I do that? Well, I'm putting things out there. Maybe it's on LinkedIn, maybe it's a YouTube, maybe it's my individual website that tell the story of who I am, that makes it really comfortable for someone to go and hire me. So if I'm providing a service, am I the fastest responder? Am I the most friendly? Am I the best team player? And how can I tell that story so it doesn't sound trite? Because those are just superlatives. They don't mean anything without the context of what that is. So that's where, some of the recommendations on LinkedIn that tell about you working with a particular brand, that you did something better than anybody else that they've ever worked with, and that you were great to get a hold of, and wow, they couldn't believe the team dynamic with you in it, and blah, 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 blah. All of a sudden it's like, oh, I need Vishal. So if you are someone who provides a product, there are certain things that make you stand out. Might be unique packaging. Might be that you anticipate the need better, that you solve the problem at the given time better, So
Interesting.
And then there's this nebulous other category. And this might be the nonprofit category, but ultimately it actually applies to everyone these days, because if you look at, for instance, what millennials value in the employers that they're looking to work for, they're looking at values, and they're looking at charitable contributions, and they're looking at worldviews, right? And by the way, employers are doing the same thing, right?
Makes
they're
sense.
looking at your tweets. And if you have some nice racist tweets in your past, like I would say, delete your Twitter history after a certain amount of time, because you never know what's going to come back and bite you, right? And it could just be because you forwarded someone, and then all of a sudden they're like, that person goes off the rails, and they're like, oh, you're friends with that person? And you're like, I don't even know that person. But still, there are all these different pieces that tell the story of you. But you have to know kind of what it is. And it's really hard to know when it's you. So what are you going to do? Well, ask questions. The people that are the closest to you. Best clients, best, team members, and say, what is it about me that made you choose me? So Vishal, why did you invite me out to this podcast today? Why did you choose me? Out of everybody that you could have on this podcast today, why am I speaking to you?
Interesting. No, that's a fair point. And let's take a step back. From your vantage point, what exactly is gig? Like, how do you define gig?
I honestly define it incredibly broadly. It is on-demand or project-based services that can be provided by anyone at any time. Okay. So that means it goes way beyond this idea of just Uber and Airbnb. Because sometimes the gig economy is framed, like if you look at it from an Airbnb standpoint, it's framed as a resource that's underutilized, like something that you have and you're not staying there right now. So then how come you couldn't rent it and make income off of it? Or why is that car sitting in the garage? Go deliver some packages and make some money, or rent it out to somebody who's going to deliver some, and that's fine. That's one way to look at it. But there are, again, such a plethora of different apps and platforms, and understandably, even individuals that go out and get individual projects. Because think about it, you can start on a gig platform, but if you start to get known for something, chances are people will start reaching out to you. Maybe they did a search on LinkedIn and reached out to you.
Right.
I recently got contacted from Singapore to do a speaking event there. I didn't reach out to them. They reached out to me, right? And so when you get to that point, it takes a while to get there. When you get to that point, it's an and, not an or, right?
Interesting. And in your gig as a writing journey, like what are some of the aha moments that you observed that which made you, okay, wow, I was not thinking about this?
I dedicate an entire chapter in The Gig Is Up to ethics, because it is so weird. Like it is so weird right now to go out there, and not only that, this political climate, like what's real, what's fake, how, as an individual, as a freelancer, if you're not on a platform, you have to trust that you're going to get paid.
Right.
So how is it that, and they have to trust that you're going to deliver on whatever you promised. And so it's like, how does that even work anymore? So before, when I started thinking about like, what is ethics now? Like today, in this day and age, in this culture, and this, where there's like, versions of the truth, and, who knows what. It's like, are you somebody who has versions of the truth, or is there just, the truth? And so for me, I said, I think it's important to have your own ethics. Like to kind of take the time to include it. Like if you are to a place where you're a freelancer and you actually have contracts with people, what if you had that as part of your contract? Like these are the ethical standards that I abide by. Because what you don't want is, you don't want to go in bed with a client and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, you don't mind like just taking this, like this thing that this other person wrote, right? Like you could just write around it and put it in there. And that's where you go, hold on, I don't do that. And it's again, it's a place that comes from confidence, because you know who you are. And you also don't have a lot of choices in the beginning, right? When you start, like you're just taking work because you're going to take work. And so sometimes it's hard to say no.
True.
But it might be easier to say no if something doesn't quite smell right, because you don't want that to be part of your track record. You're building, on all your projects, you're building. So
interesting.
Ethics, individual ethics, and defining that are really one of the ahas that surprised me in this, because this idea that we're all going out there and there's certain things that you're just not going to think about, because you're used to this other reality, and all of a sudden not there anymore. It's pulled away.
Interesting. So I think interesting point about ethics. I think recently I remember one of the conversations I remember, I was talking to this big company. They sell shoe, kind of a big sort of shoe sellers, and they were talking about the problem of fake talent. So I said, what the hell is fake talent? And they told me that, hey, you know what, Vishal, nowadays we are seeing sort of people who are giving interviews, they're just lip moving and someone else is talking on their behalf. and so like I can figure out that there's sometime their lips and their response don't match and all that, and then I realized that. And the complaint was that as we are heading into this gig economy, now businesses have to deal with more sort of diverse pool of talent from all sectors of life, right? And then even the work requirement is shrinking, so they can't invest too much per candidate to acquire, right? So then this idea of trust and sort of these things creeps in. What is your take on that? Like, say if suppose I am an enterprise and I'm trying to look at this sort of gigified workforce to actually help me move forward in my deliverables, what are some of your thoughts there? Like, what are you seeing from your end?
Comes down to trust, right? So this idea of a lot of platforms are built on the review.
Hmm.
Talk about Yelp and we talk about LinkedIn recommendations, but if I'm hiring somebody off of Upwork, there's reviews there. And go beyond the stars, right? It matters what people write. Like this idea of what's omitted. It's kind of like the due diligence that you do in HR where you call the former employer.
Hmm.
A lot of times they can't say very much. Maybe they only verify that the person worked there.
Hmm.
But a lot of times it's what they don't say or what they choose to say, and you get a feeling from it, right? But it's one of the difficulties that we're going into. I feel like as someone who does hire other people, if I come across someone that has their own ethical guidelines and they share them with me, like to me, that right there is a unique value proposition point.
Hmm.
Because this is someone that has thought about this, or maybe they've been screwed. I don't know. But like the point is that they're aware of it and they're saying, I'm personally taking responsibility for, you know, being an above board type of person and, hopefully finding a fit with a company that's the same. So, I mean, that's pie in the sky. In reality, a lot of shady stuff happens out there, you know?
Right.
I don't know
In,
how many Twitter followers are real, right? Like,
interesting. And I think I remember this the story from TripAdvisor end. So I think there was a fake restaurant, right? So in UK, and they became number one restaurant without serving a single dish, and they pretty much used bunch of trolls and bunch of sort of network to prove the point that these platforms are so easy to manipulate and hack because they have a very predictable way to measure success. And I think, and you rightly said about I think the review, right? So if someone is 5 star, you want some kind of authenticity there, and then you have your own bias, and someone could actually exploit your bias, and you don't have a budget for hiring sort of a third party service to go after every pick of Airbnb. So from your vantage point, would the platform that provide these gigified workforce, would they be upping up their sort of responsibility in ensuring the safety of both the side of the demand and the supply?
I think that's what one of the reasons is behind Upwork's growth is because you have it both ways. You're reviewed both as someone who's hiring. Now, there's a whole other discussion we can get into in terms of reviews, including, again, there's the dark side of reviews. We know that there's Amazon fake reviews that exist for products. I've seen it firsthand. I worked at a company where I saw they were hired by a particular technology company, and then all of a sudden our entire customer service team was writing reviews, and I was like, why are they what's going on there? And they're like, everybody does it, and to whatever extent a lot of the onus falls on the platform. And that's what we're seeing, right? We're seeing these changes right now on a lot of these platforms, including Facebook, taking responsibility for kind of rooting out the fake stuff. But that stuff exists. I think I read that most login attempts at e-retailers are fake login attempts. In other words, they are the majority of login attempts are bots trying to use data to see what will allow them to get in and then get more information that they can then sell. Dark web type stuff. And so like these things exist. So as an individual, you can look at it and go, oh my God, this is overwhelming. What am I going to do? Like, this is crazy. Or you can start to talk to people and say, what would you recommend me for? What are some things that I can work on? Like people that are trusted. And ideally, like for instance, if you and I have a great conversation today and you say to me, Olga, I think you were like one of the best guests on this podcast. You know what I'm going to ask? I'm going to say, Vishal, we're connected on LinkedIn. Would you mind putting what you just said into a recommendation form? And yes or no, that ask is important because you're not putting words into someone else's mouth. You're taking something that they've said authentically about you or something. So it's almost like you end up having a different filter because you're thinking about how people choose and you're thinking about how to tell your story. And anybody else that can help tell that story, again, is more authentic, right? Social proof. So I don't know if that's helpful in kind of answering the question because there's a whole dark side to all of this stuff. We know this, right?
Right.
When you have Tim Berners-Lee regretting that he created the World Wide Web right now, that's something, And so, but we have this reality and we live in this reality and we got to pay our rent. We got to provide for our family. And so how can we best navigate knowing that these things are on the horizon? And the good news is you have a great deal of power within you. And there's a lot of unique and awesome contributions that you and you alone can provide. And someone is going to think that there's a market of one and it's you. They got to have you. They got to have you. So again, what makes them choose you? So once you understand a little bit more about how people do the choosing, I think it's better off in general, just like in your life.
Interesting.
You start realizing like either the great talents that you have, or sometimes a really hard look at like, oh, I'm not there yet. I better invest a little bit more in my education. And that might be through a online class, not necessarily a traditional, I got to go to university, but whatever those things are, like, can you be open to that place? Because most people can't, not right now. Nobody likes to be reviewed, certainly not negatively. As an author, I read every single review of my book and it hurts every time I get something that's not good. But the thing that hurts even more are the things that aren't that was maybe a troll attack, right? And it's like, God, I got to deal with that now. And here I just wanted to put some concepts out there and help some people, but that's the game we play. There's a famous quote by Theodore Roosevelt that Brene Brown likes to quote, and I love it. And it has to do with, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it has to do with being the man in the arena. And that rather be the man in the arena and go out there and fail than never be in the arena at all. And I feel like we're setting ourselves up with a lot of the social media and a lot of everything to never be in the arena. And yet the way the future of work is going, we all have to take a step in the arena.
Interesting.
And realize that the critics are in the cheap seats.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fair point. It's a fair point.
Right in front of you.
Yeah. And so what is the takeaway from the book? Like if users take away, what would they take away from the book?
You can do this. That this is something that is doable and the future is bright. That there are things that you can do, that you can take control and you can do that will make you more successful in the future of work.
Interesting. So now let's talk about you for a few minutes. And thank you so much for walking us through the gig. That's fascinating. So in your journey, if I would say, what has helped you stay sane? Like what are some of the qualities that has helped you achieve whatever you have achieved so far, what would you attribute those qualities? What would be those qualities?
I think the number one thing is having your own advisory board, trusted people, mentors. Like I mentor other people, and I have a couple mentors. And one of my mentors is in Chicago, and we try to FaceTime once a week. And sometimes we talk about nothing, and sometimes we talk about everything. But it's a touch point for me. And it's something that you can do to give back to others as well. And you should. Because we all have to help each other in this.
Interesting. And other thing we ask our guests is to share about their favorite book that they have read. Do you have some recommendation for our listeners and viewers?
Okay, so on top of my book here, I have.
Yes.
So I speak a lot, and I absolutely love. So if you want to understand how to make a presentation, whether it's for work, like a sales presentation, or to your boss, or to a huge audience, I would absolutely recommend Nancy Duarte's book called Resonate. In it, she talks about how even the lowly PowerPoint can be viewed as the hero's journey. So that's awesome. A fan of, I'm a huge fan. In fact, I'm probably a super fan of Seth Godin's. I think you're a fan of his too. So I have Linchpin here. I have Goleman's book of Emotional Intelligence. It's a classic book in the sense that
very good book.
Emotional intelligence, the MBA program that I was part of, this was actually part of some of our required reading, and I was very happy to see that there. And then the top book I have is Hatching Your $1 Million Business by an author by the name of Dan Tepke. And in there is someone who worked at the University of Chicago in the MBA program with product labs and teams, and helped launch thousands of products. And so through that process has taught these MBA students in particular method, and he shares it. I thought was fascinating.
Interesting. So we are at the last question of the conversation, and thank you so much for helping us understand gig. So if you want our listeners and viewers to take away from this conversation, like what would be your closing remark for our listeners and viewers?
There's a few that are rolling through my mind. So I'll just leave it at this. I'd love for everyone to think about how they can best support another. And through that support, how they can highlight the things that are best about them. So whether it's personally or professionally or for a charitable organization because of the cause that you believe in, there are so many ways that you can get involved to just make the world a better place by showing off your best quality. So I'd love to see them, and I'll put it out there to your listeners. And if there's any way that I can help support that, just reach out to me at Chunk of Change and we'll make that happen.
Awesome. With that, thank you so much, Olga, for your time and sort of sitting with us and helping us understand the gig economy. And thank you so much for your time. You're always welcome back on the podcast, and hope to see you back, hopefully with your new book or next book. Thank you.
It'll be a while. I still need to recover from it.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Vishal. Anytime.
I thought I was sick of home, but actually I was homesick. Never really knew that I would have to grow up so quick. I'm so uncomfortable, don't know anybody here. Just a couple dudes that I met once, that's it. And I go into the booth feeling nervous. Got butterflies in my stomach like I'm so worthless. Is the mic on? I don't know how to work this. Inside I'm breaking down, I hope I'm not up on a